Spring, 4111, Year of the Tusk, the Central Junati Steppe. Cnaiur Skiotha and Anasurimbor Kellhus travel southeast on the plains of the Junati. The great grasslands feel desolate since the disaster at the Battle of Kellhus, where once great tribes gathered in the thousands. Now there are few, mostly sons of dead fathers. Cnaiur continues to be suspicious of Kellhus, and knowing of his strange ability to read emotions, he keeps their conversations brief. As the rain-swept plains unfold before them, Kellhus asks about their ultimate destination, about Shime. The Sylvendi tells the Outlander that Shime is holy to the Enrithi, followers of Inri Sigenis, but is currently possessed by the Phantom. For all of his knowledge, the Dunyain remains ignorant of the world outside of Ishal. Cnaiur considers the different paths he and Kellhus might take to reach Shime. His kind is loathed by both the Enrithi and the Phantom, the two faiths that, according to Ikirai Confis, might soon find themselves embroiled in a holy war. He needs more information before deciding which route to take, and the Hethanta Mountain Pass draws close. In the evenings, Kellhus keeps prying at the Sylvendi, trying to learn what he knows and gain his trust, but Cnaiur is implacable. He pretends to go to sleep, then draws his blade and sneaks up to Kellhus. But no, he decides. The Dunyain would have predicted the attempt on his life. He would have stilled the killing blow somehow. No, they are always 2 steps ahead of him. Frustrated, angry, and confused, the Sylvendi tries to get some sleep instead. Eventually, the 2 men reach an abandoned camp of the Akunahor tribe near the very foothills of the Hethantas. Cnaiur knows that they have almost crossed the steppe. Then, with unaccountable certainty, he realized that Kellhus would kill him. The son of Moingus no longer needed him. Doing his best to hide his expression, he insists that they must cross the mountains. The Sylvendi knows that he is running out of time. He spends the night weeping in an abandoned yaksh. The following day brings bright skies, cold morning air, and more Sylvendi. Thus far their journey has been lonely, with little interaction with other tribesmen. Those that they have seen have been cordial. Nevertheless, the steppe remains a perilous place. So the 2 men prepare for a dangerous encounter as the horsemen approach. Cnaiur sees a group of captives herded together, likely taken from a recent raid on one of the frontier towns of the Cnaiur Empire. As the newcomers ride closer, he sees faces painted white. They belong to the Munuati tribe. He also notices that none of the men wear Kian battle caps, which means they were too young to have fought at the Battle of Zerkirta. Cnaiur is the veteran here. The Munuati leader announces himself as Panteruth Urs Mutkayas. Cnaiur responds in kind and immediately realizes that he doesn't like the arrogant stripling before him. The man is even brash enough to suggest that Cnaiur and his blonde companion could be spies. Cnaiur reminds the boy of who he is, and Panteruth makes a fatal reply. We've heard the stories. There's not a man on the steppe who hasn't laughed at the name of Cnaiur Skiotha. A mad instant, then scrambling violence. The Munuati are 20 strong, yet half of the warband stayed behind to watch the captives. This gives Cnaiur and Kellhus a fighting chance. Cnaiur scrambles with the closest foes, unhorses Panteruth and eliminates 3 others. He glances at Kellhus and sees that 3 tribesmen lay at his feet as well. The others come charging at a hard gallop, screaming the war cry of their tribe. Cnaiur dismounts. Using his horse's coverage, he lets fly several arrows, taking down 2 more. Then he has to take cover behind his mount, as returning arrows descend upon him. In the chaos, he manages to glimpse Kellhus, standing alone. A dozen riders are charging at the Dunyain, half of them shooting arrows, the other half furiously closing the gap. Kellhus simply swats the projectiles from the air. Cnaiur knows that no man could survive such a brutal charge, and he thinks Kellhus finished. The gap closes. All Cnaiur can see is dust and the flash of steel. Soon, Cnaiur realizes that more Munuati tribesmen are headed his way. He grabs a shield from one of the fallen and charges into the fray on foot. He manages to leap onto the horse of one of the mounted Sylvendi and takes him out. He vaults from and collides with another rider. The pair tumble onto the ground, grappling. But the young Munuati is nothing compared to the breaker of horses and men. Cnaiur snarls as he takes his life. "I'm stronger, stronger." Scanning the field, he realizes that there is one lone Munuati left. He charges towards Kellhus, lowering a lance. Cnaiur respects the young man, who surely knows he is about to perish. As he watched, the Dunyain caught the iron tip of the man's lance with his sword, guiding it to the turf. The lance snapped, jerking the Munuati back against his high cantle, and the Dunyain leapt, impossibly throwing a sandaled foot over the horse's head and kicking the rider square in the face. The man plummeted to the grasses, where his leathery tumble was stilled by the Dunyain's sword. What manner of man? Just as soon as it began, the battle ends. Cnaiur makes his way around the fallen, silencing those that still breathe. He finds Panteruth, crawling away. His powerful hand closes about the man's throat, silencing him for good. The very sky flinched. Kellhus watches the Sylvendi do his wicked work, and knows with certainty that the barbarian is mad. The pair make their way toward the wailing captives, a dozen women bound together. They are horrified, not only by their capture and enslavement, but by what they have just witnessed. Cnaiur sees one with blonde hair, beautiful. She is to be his prize. Her name, he would learn much later, is Serwe. Serwe is filled with utter dread. Her whole life has been misfortune after misfortune, but at least her childhood was filled with happiness and joy. Picking wildflowers on the prairies of Sepalor, thrashing like an otter in the river with her brothers, romping around midnight fires. Born to a loving mother and father, Serwe used to think she would amount to something. Soon, everything changed. She was sold by her father to the patridomos of House Gaunum, an Ancire house of the congregate. Her childhood ended that day, and her suffering began. She was to be a concubine. The Gaunum wives would constantly scold her, jealous of her beauty. Serwe was a survivor. She prayed fervently to the ancestor spirits of the house that enslaved her, hoping that one of her masters would grant her his favor, would raise her up. One of the patridomos' sons took her for himself, and she became pregnant. But her child was born blue. So they said. Stillborn, they said. All the children of concubines, the other women said, would suffer the same fate. But Serwe kept praying at the house shrine, praying to her master's ancestors for the destruction of those very same masters. Soon enough, those prayers would be answered. Like wolves in a henhouse, the Sylvendi preyed upon undefended territories of the empire. The Munuati raided the villa, enslaved the survivors. She had traded one nightmare for another, one set of chains for another. Captive of the Sylvendi, some might argue a fate worse than death. And yet, Serwe persevered. She was Serwe, daughter of Ngera, and she deserved far more than what had been given. She would have dignity, or she would die hating. Now shackled to the very women who despised her, she is filled with the dread that has been so constant in her life. Yet, she knows that the Sylvendi who now approaches is an altogether different sort of man. As Kellhus watches Cnaiur claim Serwe as his prize, a strange feeling overtakes him, a feeling he has not felt before. Is it anger the Dunyain feels? Pity? Sorrow? From what darkness had this come? Something is happening to me, Father. Cnaiur speaks Shayak with Surwe, a language Kellhus has not yet mastered. The Silvendi has confirmed that the Enrithi do indeed gather to punish the Phantom. That night, Surwe finds a weapon. She sneaks across the campfire to where the mad Silvendi sleeps. With tears in her eyes, she crawls to the sleeping barbarian. Yet before the strike can land, a hand stills her blade. The strange blond man who travels with the Silvendi carries her back to her bed. She sees a sadness in his eyes. He points to his chest and says, "Kellhus." The following day, Cnaiur frees the other prisoners and puts Surwe onto the back of his horse. Screams trail in their wake as Surwe rides away with the two strange men. The other women know they are doomed, alone with no supplies on the Silvendi steppe. They beg their former slave to tell the men of their worth. They beg to be enslaved themselves. Surwe pretends not to hear. She is a survivor. As the trio travel, Surwe begins to converse with Kellhus, who is picking up her native language with inhuman ease. Initially, she thought the blond man a slave to the Silvendi, but over time, she came to realize that the barbarian hated, even feared him. Surwe imagines Kellhus taking her away from Cnaiur and claiming her as his own prize. In the Norsirai's eyes, Surwe thinks she sees a kindness, a vulnerability. In the eyes of the Silvendi, there is only hate and fury. Yet, every night she belongs to Cnaiur. Eventually, they reach the outskirts of the Cnaiur Empire, the Three Seas, the last great civilization of men. Cnaiur calls a halt, saying, "We cannot continue like this." Kellhus has been anticipating this moment for weeks. He's decided it must be now. "We cannot travel through the Empire. I brought you here to kill you." Or, Kellhus replied, still speaking to the vista before him, "to be killed by me." Kellhus has sensed Cnaiur's true intention, knowing that if he could not kill the father, then he would settle for killing the son. As he scrutinizes the mad Silvendi, he sees one emotion stronger than all the rest. So much torment. Kellhus still has use of the Silvendi. He remains ignorant of how the true world works. Cnaiur is dangerous, mad even, yet without him Kellhus would be lost. He knows that the only way for him to reach Shimei is to join the Holy War. Kellhus reminds Cnaiur of his father. "After 30 years among world-born men, what kind of power do you think my father, a Dunyain possessing all the gifts I possess, wields? You think that I have no need of you? That I have no need of Cnaiur Urs Skiotha, the many-blooded, the breaker of horses and men? A man who can strike down 3 in the space of his many heartbeats? A man who is immune to my methods, and therefore to those of my father as well? Whoever my father is, Silvendi, he will be powerful, far too powerful for any one man to kill." Cnaiur remains suspicious of what the Dunyain says. "You say this to deceive me, to lull me." Kellhus realizes that the barbarian cannot be convinced. He must be shown. He draws his blade and lunges. Silvendi and Dunyain battle upon the mountain peak, each man surprising the other with their strength of arms. Surwe screams in the background, urging Kellhus to kill Cnaiur. The Silvendi's anger doubles, and the Dunyain is humbled with a strike to the face. He tastes his own blood, and wonders how he could have misjudged his opponent so thoroughly. Casting his sword aside, Kellhus dodges Cnaiur's blows and delivers open-handed slaps. He disciplines him physically, as an abusive father would to a son, or a husband to wife. Defeated and chastised, Cnaiur is held by the throat over a precipice. "Do it," he gasped. His feet swayed over nothingness. so much hatred. The Sylvendi's eyes rounded in horror. "Let go," his expression said, "for that way lies peace." Kellhus hoists the Sylvendi to safety and drops him to the ground. Cnaiur is still distrustful, realizing that the Dunyain might truly need him still, if only because of his ignorance of the three seas. He remains wary, but raises no real argument to the plan put forth by Kellhus. A lone Dunyain and a Sylvendi would rouse suspicion amongst the Enrithi. They need new identities if they want to survive the trials ahead. Kellhus suggests that Cnaiur will be a man, awakened from his barbarity, a survivor of Ciuth who has lost faith in the ways of his people. Cnaiur ers Skiotha would pose as a dispossessed man, driven from his country by woe and misfortune. And who will you be, Dunyain? I'll be your reason for joining the Holy War. I'll be a prince you encountered traveling south over your lost lands. A prince who's dreamed of Shimei from the far side of the world. The men of the three seas know little of Atrathau, save that it survived their mythic apocalypse. We shall come to them out of the darkness, Sylvendi. We'll be whoever we say we are, a prince of Atrathau, whom you found traveling the northern wastes. The Utmote chieftain spits blood, a prince of nothing. Cnaiur ers Skiotha, his desolate prize, and the prince of nothing continue their journey, Shimei drawing ever closer.